Good afternoon, folks. This is Conservative Voice Radio, and this is Jan Reed, and I'm sitting in today for Douglas B. Gibbs. I am with Glenn and Diane, and we're here to fill you in on what's going on in our chaotic nation right now. But I do want to say the main thrust of our program has always been for the last 4 years to inform you. Now, there may be folks out there who are not of the conservative ilk. So you're free to change the dial, or you could hear what we're about. I know that we hear what the other side is about morning, noon, and night, and it seems to be more prevalent. It's on every channel, the left's opinion. And by the way, we're going to go into it on this program, how far reaching the left's opinion has gone. And we're going to start out with guns. Beto O'Rourke, at his last debate of the Democrats, yelled into the camera and said, "Hell yeah, we're coming for your guns. We're coming for your AR-15 and your AK-47. And he was asked quite a few times afterwards if he really meant that. And the leadership of the Democrat Party was horrified because you know what? He kind of told out of school, didn't he? He told us what they're planning. So if you're a gun owner out there, or you're a constitutionalist, or you understand the rights of this republic, the Second Amendment, we have a right for our guns. And by the way, that right shall not be infringed based on the Second Amendment. So if you've got a pocket constitution, look that up. Shall not be infringed means not any part of that right can be eaten away. Right, Glenn?
Right. And it was really amazing. Only one Democrat come out and denounce what he said. All the rest of them are very, very unhappy with him, and they're kind of backing away because, hey, you're not supposed to tell him what our really true intentions are. But Joe Manchin, the senator from West Virginia, come out and said, hell no, you're not taking my guns away from me. I think a lot of people, that if they're educated and they know history, realize the Second Amendment is the biggest thing between us and what we call the Gulag. The Gulag is where they executed about 20 million Russians after they had their socialism and Soviet communist takeover. That's what big government does. Socialism and communism comes out of a barrel of a gun, total force, total government control. And they can't do that to people that are well armed and have rights and liberty. And then the goal of the gun people, the Democratic Party, unfortunately, is to totally confiscate and take away your right to bear arms. But they're pissed off at Beto O'Rourke because you're not supposed to tell them what our really true intentions are. So it was pretty amazing that he came out and said that. Now, because of these recent killings, everybody gets upset every time we have a mass killing. They're pushing for some kind of gun control. Even the president of the United States says, okay, we'll take a look at something. And they're talking about doing, I believe it's background
checks, yes.
Which we already have almost in most of the big states. And right now, you can't go buy a gun from without going through the federal firearms licensing agencies through a dealer.
That's right.
They want to extend that to each individual citizen. So you have a gun and you decide to sell it to your brother, which you know you were raised with him for $100. They're going to try to outlaw you to have a right to do that and make you pay all kinds of fees and go through a firearms dealer.
Well, it would be illegal. They'd make you a felon.
Right. And so you become criminalized if you don't do this. And the problem is criminals don't obey the law. Right now we have a law where you can't go buy a gun and give it to a felon. In other words, if somebody's a criminal, they want to buy a gun, they use a straw person, somebody that can pass a background check. They pay them $100. They go down, they buy the gun for them, hand it over to them. And
doesn't that make background checks stupid?
Yes, and that's
because you can use a straw purchaser.
Right, and that's a criminal offense, and they do not enforce that law. It happens all the time. They don't enforce it. The people who were murdered in San Bernardino, the guns were purchased by a straw person. And the whole purpose of all this, first off, they're putting all kinds of hatred out there. And the young people are committing suicide. They're doing all kinds of things because they're coming out with this new transgenderism that's getting young people confused. A lot of them are going crazy, killing themselves. And sometimes they get their guns and they go out and kill a bunch of other innocent people.
Well, you know, the suicide rate is very high in the gun numbers. For instance, Diane, people have said that if guns are so dangerous, you have millions of people that are NRA members. Why isn't there a shoot up every day? Why? Because these are legal, God-fearing gun owners. Okay, they follow the law, right, Diane?
Yes, and you'll find among the NRA members that there's hardly any that's committed these crimes or any crimes.
I don't know of any.
And they don't mention that, though, do they, on false news media, right?
Fake news.
Fake news. Well, let me just say something in regards to what Jan said earlier about, guns and our freedoms, and you can't infringe upon that. They've been chipping away piece by piece, especially in California, until you're not going to have the Second Amendment anymore. I mean, piece by piece, they chip away, and now they're saying, oh, the AR-15s and the AK 47s. But, and also the Second Amendment says not only do you have a right to keep arms, you have a right to bear arms. So if I was to drive down the street and I had my gun sitting on the back seat openly in view or whatever, and a cop pulled me over and saw it, he'd arrest me. And yet I have a right to keep and bear arms.
Well, there's a new law, in fact, that you can't buy ammunition in another state if you're a Californian.
Oh, we tried before.
Yeah, I call it the death by a thousand cuts.
A number of years back, before we knew that.
But they just passed this law. So, and literally Walmart said they're not selling ammunition. So, Diane, you're perfectly right. What they're doing is they're infringing on every part of the Second Amendment without an outright gun confiscation. But if you've gone this far, that will come. And this is the part that bothers me about what's coming up. Attorney General Barr and Donald Trump, our president, got together and did an idea sheet, which they presented to some members of Congress. And what was this idea sheet? This was how they can reform some of the gun laws. And I'm telling you that is going to really hurt his base.
Well, I think it already has, too, Beto.
Well, no, I'm talking about what the Republicans are doing as far as they're always crossing the aisle and compromising, but there's never a compromise the other way. What do you think,
No, there
Glenn?
never is.
Yeah, I think the whole purpose of gun laws are to regulate law-abiding citizens. Because if you understand logic and reason, criminals do not obey the law. They circumvent the law. They'll be deceitful. They'll lie. They'll steal. They'll do whatever they can to get around the law. The laws only inhibit and infringe on law-abiding citizens. The Democratic Party knows that. All the gun advocate control people know that. Their intent is to take away the Second Amendment rights of self-defense. That right does not come from government. That's a God-given right that's given to human beings by your creator to naturally defend yourself against predators. The biggest predator that's killed more people in the 20th century has been government out of control. And that's why our forefathers expanded and codified the God-given right to bear arms to protect yourself. And that's a problem. These people they're serious. We've already had a band of what I call socialist Marxist type people that are big government have taken over California. They dominate the Assembly and the Senate. right now in Sacramento, and they're constantly passing laws. They're even passing laws to attack children in school, kindergarten through the 12th grade.
Well, we're going to get to that in the next segment about what they're doing to kids, but I want to bring something up here which really bothers me. Why aren't the Republicans talking about what we have done as far as gun control ideas? We have asked that teachers that are expert in guns be armed in school. You don't need more than one or two, okay? Just like they have a marshal on an airplane after 9/11. You don't know who the marshal is, but they are armed and they are ready. And we have put that before Congress. They are not interested.
They're not interested, are they?
And in California, you're not allowed to have a concealed carry. They're taking away any possibility. So in other words, you are like fish in a barrel. If some crazy comes up, you have nothing.
Well, this is the prelude to socialism, because once they get your guns and they take the guns, then they can do their other stuff. And then this nationwide health care things on their agenda. And you'll see the people I'm listening to, my compatriots know, but you'll see how our other topics all tie in and are all related because they have an agenda.
Absolutely right, Diane. They do tie in. And the part that we're going to get to in our next segment is how they are using your children to fight you and to take away your rights. I never thought I could ever say this, but this is exactly what's happening. And we're going to tell you how on the next segment. We're going to go to a break right now, but we'll be back. Stay tuned. And we're back on Conservative Voice Radio. This is Jan Reed hosting today. I'm sitting here with Glenn and Diane at our round table, our tea party table, and we're talking to you about what's happening in our nation. Now, yesterday, if you were on any of the channels on TV or even the radio, you would have heard about the millions of kids that were given a day off to actually protest. So they are teaching our kids to be activists, and some at a very young age. Those that went to some of these protests said they were as young as 5, going to people that were, say, in their late teens or early 20s. And they were lecturing and hounding and screaming at adults that, why aren't you paying attention? Well, this adult has an answer. Back in the 70s, I was a young mom, and I remember seeing a copy of Newsweek that scared the daylights out of me. And I said to my husband, we're going to freeze. There's an ice age coming. And it was in all of the newspapers, every headline, all of the big magazines at the time had these headlines that we literally were entering an ice age. Well, that went on for about maybe 8-10 years with these scare tactics. Scientists at that time spoke up. They poo-pooed it. They said, this is insane. This is not happening. We've got the data. This is false. And gradually it died down. Well, I guess the powers that be, the globalists, the UN, have decided there's a better way. We're going to teach your kids to be scared. And so they have indoctrinated our kids in the public schools and told them they have 12 years to live. Consequently, we've got kids that are now seeing psychiatrists, lecturing their parents, crying at night because they think they just have a few years to live.
Don't get spanked.
Yeah. So here's the thing. Someone who went to these protests, at least one of them, he actually spoke with an activist that said this. He said, we're not here only to fight against climate change, but we are fighting for socialism. He said the two are inseparable. So there you have it. Glenn, what do you make of it?
Yeah, I think that that is the primary goal, raise taxes on carbon and increase government control and ultimately go to a dictatorship or socialism, and by getting the masses. But the target is the children. children are very credulous and can be told to believe anything, and they do generally believe what they're being taught. That's just the way nature is. They're starting out with no knowledge at all. And so when they have teachers telling them, oh, yeah, we're going to have this climate change and we'll all be dead here potentially in 12 years, we're going to reach a point of no return. And it strikes
Glenn,
fear.
do you remember Al Gore saying to fifth graders, you're smarter than your parents? And I remember being so shocked by that statement. And that goes back 10 years ago, he said that.
Yeah. And Ronald Reagan mentioned if we lose one generation, if you can destroy one generation, you'll break the bounds of liberty and people will lose their freedom. And that's what these people are smart we're dealing with, and they're going after our children. They're putting fear in their hearts. Dan did mention the suicide rate is way up amongst children, and there's probably multiple reasons, but when you tell them they're going to be destroyed potentially in 12 years, their little minds, it's hard to handle that kind of information. And they end up killing themselves because they don't want to face potentially being burned up on a planet. So,
well, listen to this one, Diane. They were heard to scream out yesterday, hey, hey, ho, ho, climate change has got to go. Don't eat cows, eat the rich.
Oh, gosh. It sounds like Soylent Green's coming to me, but, who am I?
Yes.
Well, can I just say I'm honored to be here, as always. It's an honor for me to be here. I'm a volunteer, and I'm a patriot. And, I didn't know why I was so deeply a patriot until I found out. I started researching my genealogy. And I found out that I'm related to the 5th President James Monroe. I'm probably the Harrisons. I'm related to roundabout way cousin Davy Crockett, Daniel Webster. And now I just found out I'm related to Ben Franklin. He's not too far off like a first cousin.
Now, we're honored to have you with us.
But, just because I researched it, I bet a lot of us are. And we're Americans, and we're proud of it. But let me just tell you how these generations work, too. In the 60s, it started, I think. Mm-hmm. And so we had the hippie generation, and it was anti-establishment, okay? Right. Okay, so they had kids, and this next generation was kind of diluted. I'm not saying everybody. And uninformed really about true history because, you have behind the scenes, they're like diluting our history, not really. They're telling us the bad stuff. Oh, we're so bad. And
they're
like
omitting
racist.
A lot of things.
Okay. And so they had children. And now you see the new generation here. And many don't appreciate it because they don't know. And they've been brainwashed through 3 generations. And now we've got what we have.
You reap what you sow.
You know what? There's some good news on potential ways of affecting the climate. The Navy is developing nuclear power plants. I think they've done something like 100 of them for submarines and so forth, where they have nuclear power plants now that would generate electricity. And out of 100 tons of waste that's generated from it, nuclear waste, they've now reduced that down to 1.5 tons. And that 1.5 ton that is somewhat dangerous. They only need to store it for 300 years, and it can be used in medicine and a lot of other uses, and potentially for batteries that can last hundreds of years. But on top of that, the heat generated by these new nuclear power plants, and you can't do anything to make them blow up or destroy them because they use totally new technology. They can pump the carbon out of the atmosphere and convert it into oil and reuse it. And it goes back into the atmosphere as oil. But they can do this over and over and over and actually clean the atmosphere up, reduce the amount of oil that's being used that we're pumping out of the ground, and really clean the environment up even more than it is already. The problem is the United States is getting cleaner and cleaner and cleaner. The rest of the world's getting dirtier and dirtier.
Most of that waste that's in the oceans out there is from like Africa and India and places
and
like
China.
that.
And China is a huge polluter. And none of it was mentioned yesterday at these protests that they should be having these protests at China not America. We have really brought our
the air
carbon way
pollution
down. We have
really
been
bad there.
a really good nation in the last few decades. But the other part that bothers me a great deal, between the period of the 70s and here we are in 2019, scientists spoke up. They spoke up about 20, 15 years ago. They were silenced immediately, so badly that, like today, you can't speak up if you're a conservative. You can even be fired. You are just a pariah because you have a different opinion. Those scientists were shut down who had some measure of data that they could counteract this agenda that's going on, and said, well, wait, this isn't making sense because of this, this, and this. And you talk to weather people, knowledgeable weather people who have researched for hundreds of years, and they tell you this is not dire. This is not happening.
Oh, yes, we've heard that side too. And Doug Gibbs has told us all about it a number of times too. How there's another side to this.
But they've silenced just about everybody.
That isn't man. That isn't
so
man.
So the kids are believing what they're being fed every day.
They're being fed every day, constantly, like a tide. And let me say something too about, a lot of things could be done too about, changing the carbon footprint, if you will. I mean, let's say, for example, instead of the government under Obama having given $150 billion or whatever he gave to Iran, instead, why not give homeowners a grant so they can all have their own solar power? So they can all have, that's not going to be, they could have done it.
Cleaning up our waterways. Okay.
And let me tell you this too. Years ago, I heard that they had a hydrogen car and the scientist was threatened with his life. Don't you dare. I mean, that's a big giant that he goes against the oil company. A hydrogen car. And you know what the vapor is?
Agenda.
Vapor is water. It's water mist.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and stuff like that. There's a lot of things that they could be doing and they don't do.
And by the way, yesterday when they had these millions throughout the nation, guess what they left behind? Piles and piles of debris and garbage. Now, for folks that are tree huggers and worried about dying in 12 years, you can't pick up your own trash when you leave these parks.
They always do
They had
that.
photos that were disgusting of what they left behind. So, I'm done with the hypocrites. I really am.
Yeah, what concerns me is I like history. I've done a lot of reading and studying history, what's going on in the United States and throughout the world. And from what I understand, back in the 1940s and 50s, when Soviet Russia had agents working all over the world, and they made a plan for the United States. And one of the plans was to infiltrate the trade unions in the United States, infiltrate our universities and our schools, infiltrate our churches. And they actually wanted to go into elementary schools and high schools to begin working on the children there. They started with a college because they wanted to train the teachers and put them back into our high schools and schools to start working on the children, teaching them about socialism and Marxism. There's a guy named Zen, a college professor, that wrote a book on American history, and he totally warped history to show the United States as being a terrible, terrible place.
Howard Zinn, and that textbook is used throughout the United States today.
He's a staunch Marxist, socialist, hate America professor, and he's being promoted by all these organizations, including a lot of our corporation boardrooms that have been infiltrated. And a lot of these foundations that were set up by good men have now been taken over by people that have been educated by the Marxists in our universities. So they got a lot of money. They got a lot of power. They were getting ready to make their final kill when suddenly the apple cart got turned over. Donald Trump was elected president because American citizens rejected the Republican Party and the Democrat Party. And now we got a lot of, still got a few at the top of the Republican Party that hate Donald Trump.
Yeah, exactly.
They won't say it because they don't have any courage.
And what's their reason? They don't have a reason. It's because he's not part of their elite. That's why.
Well, it was part of.
I think
it was part of a club, and the Democrats and Republicans were both part of it. These Marxists, they've infiltrated everything.
Well, you can always tell the left, and let me give you the prime example. Not only do they tell you are not allowed to leave your opinion in front of them or with them, but they also tell you their opinion, and they make sure they tell you they dislike you, they hate what you stand for, and they don't want to listen to you. That's what a 5-year-old does. Okay, if you're a thinking person out there, you understand that ideas are good on both sides, and they should be debated, and they should be open about both sides. It is completely closed down at the moment.
Well,
And
it's not
sad.
It's not an equal conversation to hear both sides. It's always going to be, we're right, you're wrong.
But if you shut someone down, you don't know if they have a great idea or they have something that will better everyone. At least listen to what they have to say. But to say because you're a conservative, because you're a Republican, because you're a Trump supporter, you are not allowed to speak. Well, the last time I checked, I was in the United States of America, folks. So I don't obey the word police, and I speak my mind, especially on this program.
You know, a question people
and thank God you do.
A question people should be asking. A few years ago, they said we were having global warming. The planet was getting hot. Now they've changed the climate change because temperatures are indicating that, if anything, it might be cooling a little bit.
Well, they couldn't prove it. So that's why it went from global warming to climate change. And in the 70s, it was global freezing. And so me, as at my age, talking to my millennial granddaughter, I'm shocked that she's so sure that she is correct. And I said to her, do you not look at me and know that I have lived 3 times longer than you, that possibly I picked something up that you haven't learned yet? Is that possible? And yet the millennial in her will say, no, Grandma, this is what I learned, and I'm sure it's right. And I'm sure you're wrong.
Hey, some more news for people in Banning, Beaumont, and Cherry Valley. You're looking at another 60 cents a gallon for gasoline for this new cap and trade that the Democratic Party passed. And of course, we had about 5 Republicans that voted for it. Chad Mays was one of them.
Yes.
Unfortunately,
No, thank you, Chad Mays.
And I think that's going to be over 60 cents a gallon. It's going to be phased in over a year or so. But in addition to that, they're going to have these credits that they sell to industry. They're going to have to put money out.
Those are carbon credits, and that's part of this scam of climate change.
And if you're a customer,
it's a money deal.
If you spend money and you're a customer buying anything out there, you're going to ultimately be paying that. Because the businesses always pass the cost on to consumers. They have to, or they go out of business.
Well, yeah, and the truckers.
A lot of them will go out of business, too. When it goes
1 minute, guys. 1 minute.
Well, I think we pretty much beat up on the climate people, and they're calling the climate deniers. I actually heard someone suggest, now this was a quote news person suggest yesterday on air. Well, do you think maybe something should be done about the climate deniers? And Bernie Sanders said yes.
Okay.
So you've got Beto saying we're taking your guns. Bernie feels that people who disagree with them need to be done away with.
That's the gulag.
And Newsom saying that we're going to criminalize Christians too.
Well, there you have it,
attacking
folks.
From every angle.
So they don't want a different opinion, but they sure know what they're going to do with you. Anyway, we'll be back in a couple of minutes, and we've got a third segment, and we've got more news. I'm not sure it's good news, but at least it's going to inform you. We'll be right back. And we're back. This is Jan Reed on Conservative Voice Radio, and we are on segment 3. And I want to send a shout out to all the youngsters that are having eco anxiety. That's ECO anxiety, meaning the world's going to end in 12 years. Hey, kids, been there, done that. And let me tell you how. we're all going to read to you some of the headlines starting in 1967. You're going to love this. So now you kids out there, you think you're going to die in 12 years because of first global warming and then it became climate change. Okay, let me tell you what they predicted in 1967. Headline: dire famine forecast by 1975. 1969, everyone will disappear in a cloud of blue steam by 1989.
That's a good one.
1970, ice age by 2000.
Nope.
1970, America subject to water rationing by 1974 and food rationing by 1980. 1971, new ice age coming by 2020 or 2030. 1972, new ice age by 2070. See, they're hedging their bets there. 1974, space satellites show new ice age coming fast.
Wow.
1974, another ice age, question mark? Oh, they're doubting themselves. 1974, ozone depletion, a great peril to life.
I remember that.
I remember that.
Oh,
It
yeah.
was ban the hairspray. Remember, folks? 1976, scientific consensus, planet is cooling, famines are imminent. And then I love this one, 1980, acid rain kills life in lakes. 1978, no end in sight to 30-year cooling trend. 1988, regional droughts that never happened in the 90s. Glenn, why don't you give us a few?
Okay. 1988, temperatures in D.C. will hit record highs. That was a headline. 1988, Maldive Islands will be underwater by 2018. They're not. 1989, rising sea levels will obliterate nations if nothing done by 2000. 1989, New York City's West Side Highway underwater by 2019.
That's
it's
this
not.
year.
2000, children won't know what snow is. That's a lie. 2002, and it was a lie when they wrote that headline. 2002, famine in 10 years if we don't give up eating fish, meat, and dairy. 2004, Britain will be Siberia by 2024. 2008, Arctic will be ice-free by 2018.
It's not.
2008, climate genius Al Gore predicts ice-free Arctic by 2013. Oh man, that was a big lie.
Remember Al?
2009, climate genius Prince Charles says we have 96 months to save the world.
Unbelievable.
One more here. Let's see. 2009, UK Prime Minister says 50 days to save the planet from catastrophe. So
50 days, Diane. Pick it up from there.
Okay, number 25 here. Climate genius Al Gore moves the 2013 prediction of ice-free Arctic to 2014. 26, Arctic ice-free by 2015. Here's another one. In 2014, only 500 days before climate chaos. Okay, then here's back to 1968. Remember the overpopulation? I even had a class on that.
Yes.
And it was spread worldwide. And I said something about it, I guess, to the dean or whatever. Because it's like the teacher got after me.
Oh, my gosh.
Anyway, so we all have our stories. 1970, world will use up all its natural resources. 1966, the oil gone in 10 years. 1972, oil depleted in 20 years.
See, they
remember the
changed
gas
it.
lines? Remember
Yeah.
that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
and that was Jimmy Carter's fault. It wasn't nature.
Oh, brother. We won't get started on him, right?
Right.
1977, Department of Energy says oil will peak in the 90s. 1980, peak oil in 2000. 1996, peak oil in 2020. 2002, peak oil in 2010. 2006, super hurricane.
And that's what they're saying right now. And they said it like 11 years ago. Okay.
So they get a 0.1. No, okay, let me go on. 2005, Manhattan underwater by 2015. 1970, urban citizens will require gas masks by 1985. 1970, nitrogen buildup will make all land unusable. 1970, decaying pollution will kill all the fish. 1970s, killer bees.
Yeah, and see, here I was, this young mom, and I'm thinking, my kids, oh, killer bees. I mean, there was a headline to scare you every 5 minutes. And this is why those of us that are seniors now are saying, yeah, what else you got? Okay, because these are scare tactics. But the part that gets me, which is so upsetting, these young people are really being hurt by it because we have social media now and you have 24/7 cable. So these kids are, between the indoctrination in school and what they're getting in media, they really think this is going to happen.
It's sowing not only a lot of fear, Jan, but it's sowing anger.
Yes. You know what, Glenn? I'm wondering if the anger is going to go towards the people who say, calm down, this isn't happening.
Yeah, I think that they'll, I really believe that they'll try to bring the gulag back for people that don't agree with them. But, I think a lot of these organizations that are pushing this are being financed by oil interest in the Middle East and other areas, these communist countries. Like Russia has a big producer of oil. And now they're hurting a little bit over there in the Middle East and Russia because the United States has become oil independent.
Hurrah!
So all the big money's been flowing to the Democrats, and they've been told you have to shut down the oil industry in the United States. We need to have everybody buying their oil from us over here. And so they're using climate change, all these ridiculous predictions and everything else to still fear into people's hearts. And also, it comes right down to the money. They want to have the money over there, so they have lobbyists spending tens of millions of dollars on lobbyists in Washington, D.C., and these different environmental fanatic groups, they're financing them, all with the idea of controlling the energy supply in the United States and trying to reduce it and stop drilling here.
Well, you remember what the mantra of government is: create a problem and then give the solution. So the government right now, it appears, is trying to create this problem of climate change. And the solution, they will tell you, is to get rid of capitalism, to get rid of fuel, not be able to fly a plane, no cars, what have you. They're talking about, and these are the Democrat candidates, they're talking about prohibiting meat eating and cars and cows and fuel. And I hate to break the news to them, but what is behind the fuel that you use? Those are coal plants. Okay, do some research and you'll find out what the true source of electricity is.
Yeah, meat, they're really going after meat big time. And I think the reason they're doing that is because that's one of the most nutritious foods the human being can consume, because you're getting concentrated energy in the form of fat and protein. In order to be healthy, you need a good source of protein and fat for energy. And if you're loading up with carbohydrates, which they advertise all day long on TV and tell people how great they are, you end up becoming a diabetic. You get fat and overweight and everything else. These people that are preaching all this, they live like kings, and they eat the finest food and the finest steaks.
I'm sure they're eating meat. But there's a new term I heard just today. It is vegan Democrats.
Yeah, vegan Democrats.
Seriously.
Yeah.
Have you ever heard that?
Well, no. Soon it'll turn into closet vegan Democrats.
Closet meat eaters, I think, is what will happen.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Do not take my cheeseburger.
Well, reality has a way of asserting itself, and we're seeing millions of people now with health issues because of the diet we're on. And then you put the fear into them, that makes their hormones all go out of balance because they're afraid the world's going to come to an end in 12 years. So people are under attack psychologically and everything else.
So tell me, Diane and Glenn, what is your advice for the listener? Because so far they said, oh my gosh.
Know that it's all about power. It's a power grab. It has nothing to do with climate. It has nothing to do with your health insurance. It has nothing to do, with A, B, C, D, that they're all connecting the dots. But it's a power grab to take us into socialism. Did you guys hear that Bernie Sanders was even saying he had that some of the immigrants are climate refugees? Did you hear that one?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And by the way, he wants everyone in the world to come to America. No wall, just come on in. Let me see how your life's going to feel like, folks. Already people are screaming over the homeless tents that are throughout every big city in America now. So you want the rest of the 8 billion to walk in here?
I'll leave it at that. It's always all about the money, and I believe it's all a power grab.
One thing we can do, and we plan on doing, is some of our members of the Tea Party have got together, and they're going to print a newspaper called the Neighborhood Bulletin. And I'm going to ask them to go ahead and put this list of doomsday predictions on the climate in the newspaper and show people how ridiculous and ignorant and stupid these when you look at all these predictions, and none of them have come true. We've got an abundant food supply right now, and trying to keep the price up where the farmers won't go out of business. And during the Depression, they were dumping food in the oceans to keep the price up. The population is now at almost 7 billion.
I think it's 8.
And the whole world's getting richer and richer. There's been a couple billion people see their income increase, health. They've cured AIDS just about in Africa. The whole world's getting better, but constantly you hear negative news coming from the Democratic Party, and they're going to go after your retirement by increasing prices. They're going to charge you more for your utilities. So you're going to be huddled up in your house sitting with one light bulb on, and you're going to be paying more for your water. They're going to constantly, this beast constantly wants more and more money. And that's what we're dealing with. So
this is true. You never hear from them, well, we'll cut this program so we can do that program. No, they say we want both programs and we need more money from you folks.
And they have to destroy the system. That's why the governor of California just said, we're going to give free medical to illegal criminal aliens that break the law coming into this country illegally. We're going to give them free medical between the ages of, 15 and 35 or something like that. Millions of more, hundreds of thousands of more people. They want to break the system, make the problem worse. So you out there will start screaming, do something. And they'll say, well, you got to give up more of your rights, and then we'll do something.
So, folks, do not give up your rights. Here's my advice. Research, okay? Go on the net or go to the library and learn about these things. The best way you can learn is look at the history and know that they are trying to repeat it, and they're able to because as far as the kids go, they've taken it away from their textbooks. So the kids feel like this is brand new and it's dire, and let's not fall for it, okay? Glenn, you got any last words for us today?
I think the best advice you just give is you need to start reading and learning and study history, especially history of Russia and China and what they did to their people in the 20th century under socialism and communism.
Diane, what's your last thoughts?
Folks, we've been telling you a lot of things that we want you guys to know for quite a while now. And I would say we care about you. We love our country, and Jesus is Lord.
Thanks for listening.